Thomas Zekveld is a young man that has deep roots in our community and has brought his young family here to live here, continuing the work on his family farm. He was unsatisfied with the choices presented to him in the by-election last year, so Thomas has decided to seek your support to be Bowmanville, Oshawa North's first MP under the Christian Heritage Party of Canada's banner. Today's guest at Exit 425.
In the main corridor of Exit 425.
Local politicians to connect with families.
What are some unique challenges?
Thanks very much, Steve, for having me.
Exit 425. It's where we live. Thomas, welcome to Exit 425. Thanks for meeting me here today.
Morning, Steve. Thank you for having me.
What are your connections to Bowmanville, Oshawa North, which I may interchangeably refer to as BON? And how were you involved in BON prior to this opportunity to run for office?
Yeah, I was born and raised here on a farm just north of Bowmanville, and I went to high school locally. And yeah, during that time, then I volunteered within the school as well as volunteering for different sports groups, reffing and that kind of thing. And I started donating blood as soon as I was of age. And that's something I think is very important. And then after that, then I left for university. So then I was not involved here very much. But then since then, last year, moved back with my family. And yeah, I've gotten really involved within my church here as well. But then, yeah, haven't had a whole lot of time to do things with a young child around and working on the farm.
There's an incredible amount of growth in Bowmanville, Oshawa North, and describe some of the unique Bowmanville, Oshawa North issues that you intend to work to resolve if you're elected.
Yeah, the growth in this area and the whole GTA is quite rapid. And I think one of the things that I think is really important is wastewater. And the municipality needs to do a great job of bringing all the development together in a good way, but then the federal government has to invest in wastewater treatment facilities, which they have over previous years, and they should continue into the future. And if I were an MP in this riding, then I would also advocate for continued development of treatment facilities, because when you see what's happening in Toronto, we need to learn from that. Like last year, they released 1.3 billion liters of semi-treated sewage into Lake Ontario. We can't do that in this riding. We need to make sure that we are not polluting our lakes. So that would be one thing that with the rapid growth, that would be really important. Yeah. One thing I think is funny is the cell service. Growing up, I didn't really have a phone for a while, but then as I got older and got a phone, you dealt with spotty service. That was just part of it. And then moving to Guelph, I noticed, well, you just have service here. And so that's something where it's not something that federally we have a lot of jurisdiction over. In the municipality, it has plans for 5 new towers in the riding, but those have to be approved by the federal government. So federally, yeah, we would work to make those cell towers available, but yeah, we don't have much jurisdiction over that. And then for other things such as the nuclear plant in Darlington, that's something that the province and the municipality, they are allowed to figure out how much power you need and if you need a new reactor. Basically, the federal government's jurisdiction is just over researching and development and safety of those things. And so with the Christian Heritage Party, we believe in equal opportunity for energy. And so we would continue to invest in nuclear along with other forms of power. And so that's something locally we hope to continue to invest in for nuclear, to have that source of jobs and energy in the riding. And the waterfront is something that is a tricky topic, because there we have in Bowmanville, Oshawa North, a nice spot of territory along the Lake Ontario. Part of that is Darlington Provincial Park. And I think that in and of itself, the name shows that the federal government doesn't have much jurisdiction over that. And I, as an MP, would not have much bearing on that. The federal government doesn't even own the water on the water side of the waterfront. We only have jurisdiction over fisheries and transportation. So, and then as it comes as far as the land, we also don't have jurisdiction except for like federally owned properties. So like national parks, we don't have any of those within the Bowmanville Oshawa North territory. So yeah, there's not much from a federal perspective I can promise you. But yeah, that's kind of, from my opinion, of the unique issues to Bowmanville Oshawa North, how I see it.
One of the things that is done some places, the idea of open houses to meet and communicate with our MP, and this has been a bone that I decided to start picking recently, particularly. Will you be prepared to offer regular open house opportunities in this riding to allow people to speak with you without the formalness of the current locked, frosted doors of the MP's office?
Yeah, I think that it's very tough, because I think MPs on one side don't want to just host an opportunity for a bunch of people to just have a gripe fest kind of at their front door. But you also need to listen to your constituency and provide a proper avenue to do that, because not everybody wants to book an appointment. So I, as an MP, would commit to once a month, because you have to spend a certain amount of time in Ottawa and you get a certain amount of time at home in your home riding. So my goal would be to dedicate one day a month that I would put out in my monthly newsletter for next month. This is the date that my door is open. I'll be in my office and you don't have to book an appointment. Just walk in. And so that way I can hear my constituency, the regular people who don't necessarily have time to book an appointment, but they can just show up to my door.
Well, and people who are a little bit intimidated with the office, right? And they don't know necessarily what to do. So that allows that, that's where the term open door comes from. So, I think that's a laudable goal. Now, on that note, there was a lot of fuss prior to our by-election raised by the Prime Minister at the time about, who would be what for our riding. And he made a big fuss about Robert Rock and Jamil Javani on opposite sides of the coin, I guess, of this issue. But is it about representing the riding to Parliament, or is it about, representing or selling the party's position to the riding for you?
That's a good question. I think that it's both at different times. When during a campaign, I am going to try to convince the people of Bowmanville Oshawa North that the Christian Heritage Party and myself have the best plan for the area and for Canada. So that's me trying to show the people why our party platform is the best. Now, if I get elected, then now I take what the Christian Heritage Party and I believe to Parliament on behalf of the Bowmanville Oshawa North riding with their input. And that's where the talking to people in open houses and visiting is important, because they voted you in. So now you need to take your platform forward with their input. And so, the election is a time to convince the people. And then if they support that, you take that to Ottawa.
That's a great answer. Saying different things at different times, and that's a good, honest answer as well. Now, without speaking of the deficiencies of other parties' positions or past approaches, what are the characteristics of your party's approach to the following things that make you the best choice for Canada in 2025? And so we'll eliminate the talk about anybody else, just so that, because I know it drives some people a bit mad when people present their opinions on things or their position, but it's based mostly on trashing somebody else. So we'll just stick with where the CHP feels, or what they feel about certain things. So let's start with taxation.
Yeah, for taxation, I think this is one of the policies for the Christian Heritage Party I think could have the potential of the biggest effect on Canada. So basically every year when you work 15 to 33% of your income is gone in income tax. And so the Christian Heritage Party proposes that we get rid of federal income tax completely and replace it with a consumer's tax. And so there's a few reasons why I think this would be a game changer for Canadians, because first of all, when people talk about fair taxation across different pay windows, this is a perfect way to do that, because in lower income families and workers, they're going to be having less money to spend, so they'll have less tax, versus higher income Canadians will be probably spending more, so they're going to have more tax. When you buy a $150,000 car, you're going to have a lot more tax versus if you buy a $25,000 car, which is what most people buy. And so in this way, low income Canadians and young people, because you don't have that work experience to have that high paying job, you can save that money. And if you want to spend it, that's up to you. But if you want to save that money, you can. And so people who are on the line of poverty, they can keep that money and grow for the future. And the people who are rich, yeah, maybe if they don't want to spend a whole lot of money, they can pay less tax. But in general, you're going to have representative taxation because of this. And I think another really cool thing about this is people I talk to in the riding, they often say like the government taxes and then taxes again and then taxes again versus consumer's tax is on brand new things. So you get taxed once. If you want to buy a used car, you don't have to pay tax on that. And so it encourages a society of buying used and reusing and keeping your old things. And this, I think, is really important for people in the community, because it also promotes less of a throwaway society. Like you see it, people buy things, throw it away, buy it, throw it away, buy it cheap, throw it away. This would encourage people to buy things that maybe cost a little bit more, but are going to last 15, 20 years. And so this will be, I think, a game changer when it comes to waste management, because we have so much waste. We talk about how much we care about the environment as people, but then we throw so much junk away. And so fair tax would encourage people to recycle and reduce and reuse. That's a slogan that goes back for years. And so I think it would be really key for the environment, as well as just helping Canadians save their own money.
Brilliant idea and brilliant perspective. And I love the environmental approach, because I cringe every time I see people throwing, large screen TVs away. You go to the waste transfer site and you see all these electronics and things like that, it's just, as much as you want to repair them, sometimes it's impossible to find someone to do it. And the cost, it seems like it's meant to be prohibitive to encourage you to purchase a new appliance instead of replacing the old one or fixing the old one. So I think that's a brilliant idea.
Another idea connected to that, which isn't on the CHP platform, but I think is a great idea. In some countries, they make a mandatory warranty for like electronics and washing machines and that kind of stuff. And so then let's say you have a 15-year warranty, and then you have to take it back and refurbish it and sell it again. And so that's something I think could also be really key in that area, that because companies just give you a thing that lasts 4 years and then you have to throw it out. So it's also on the company's side as well.
Yeah. Very interesting. The other part of that is the bureaucracy required for taxation. It would shift. It might be something that you could reduce with the consumer tax. Not sure how that works, but knowing just how massive that income tax department is, I'm sure that there would be some change in the bureaucracy for that. Heard recently a mention of just the pause, I guess, in the carbon tax, and that there's 500 people involved in the, I imagine, the revenue department. Their job is to focus on the carbon tax, and that's 500 people, and there's a lot of money involved with those salaries. So, and equipment and office space and everything like that. So, that kind of proposal also changes the nature of the people, the number of people that are required to manage that tax. So, all right, that's a lot about that. We touched on environment. What about the environment? And you're a farmer. I'm sure the environment's important to you.
Yes, the Christian Heritage Party has a much different perspective than most other parties on the environment, and I, as a farmer, I really appreciate that, because there's a lot of talk in the public and universities about climate change and carbon dioxide and methane. And what I have come to see is, like, I'm a third generation farmer, and we pay attention to the weather all the time, weather patterns, and we know how things have gone. And every year is different, and every year has extremes in one way or another that you don't see other years. And there's a lot of cry of like carbon dioxide and methane. And I believe that God created this earth to be resilient and to adapt to different conditions. And I think carbon dioxide is one of those things where there's certain kinds of plants that photosynthesize at different rates based off of how much carbon dioxide is in the air. So you have more carbon dioxide, then those plants absorb more carbon dioxide. And so that's how the earth is created to balance that well. And when we think of like methane emissions from cattle and transportation, that's something where when you think about how many cattle have roamed Canada over the past hundreds of years, nothing much has changed in that way. And so the CHP believes that that's not where we should focus our research dollars and our attention, because it's actually hurting farmers and reducing agricultural output. We should be investing in efficiency in farming for environmental impact. But where we see the biggest environmental impact would be in waste in our environment, waste in our waterways, because that is killing wildlife. That is reducing biodiversity. And so that's something where if we can clean that up and spend money on reducing waste, like what I said with the fair tax, that I think will be the best thing to preserve our environment instead of focusing on emissions.
Another big part of the environment is just habitat destruction, and some of it is for wildlife, and some of it is for us. And we'll get to the question about our northern climate and housing, but food security is an issue that we need to consider with the environment, because we keep paving over farmland, and it's good farmland, and at some point we have to reconcile that. So we'll talk about that a little bit more in a few minutes, but let's move on to healthcare. People are always nervous about healthcare. We have called our system universal healthcare system. I don't know if it's as universal as it used to be. I don't know that it's all that it's quite made out to be. I'm stumbling over my words a little bit. It is a provincial issue, but like the federal government does on a lot of provincial issues, they spend a lot of money on healthcare, and so they have an impact. And so, what does the Christian Heritage Party feel about healthcare?
Yeah, from a healthcare perspective, you're right. The perspective of different jurisdictions, provincial, taking care of healthcare, I think governments more view their jurisdiction as just funding those governments and just letting them do their thing, which from a jurisdiction's perspective makes total sense. But there's a whole undertaking around that I think is really important. And so the Christian Heritage Party believes in a two-pronged approach, where on one side, yes, we need to do everything we can to help the healthcare system. So one of our platforms is to speed up the processing and accepting of foreign doctors without reducing your quality of doctors. My wife has a family doctor who is from a foreign country, and she's great. And so if we can get those good doctors here faster, if they want to come, then we would like to expedite that process. But then the other aspect is healthy living. And yeah, we can't mandate healthy living, but we can do a few things around that in letting people know about health risks, and also making sure that companies are doing their due diligence with their foods. I think some of the things when it comes to healthy living, I was looking up the statistics, and 78% of adults and 90% of children aged 5 to 7 don't hit the recommended daily activity in a given week in Canada. And so that's something where if you're not having an active healthy lifestyle, you can't expect to just be a healthy individual. But then beyond that, when I look at statistics about alcohol, when I was in university, people are just consuming crazy amounts of alcohol and they don't even know the risks of that. Like, alcohol is a carcinogen, yet there's 18% of men and 13% of women in Canada that regularly consume over the low risk amount of alcohol. That people need to know about that. And then cell phones is something that I find interesting because there's mixed data on this as to whether they are a health concern for cancer or not. There's some studies that show that they are a health risk, some that are not. But when you think of almost like everybody has a cell phone at this point, the government needs to put money into research to figure this out, because if they are problematic and cancer causing, we need to take steps to address that, because those are future cancer patients that will be in our system. Mm-hmm. And then I think the other thing is food. I think my wife and I, when we go in the grocery store, she always comments, you can't get real food here. You go down the aisles, where are the baking supplies? It's all pre-made. And all this processed food, it's not always very healthy for us. And so I think that that's something where if we are able to talk to people about that and like get literature out there to tell people like the risks of like food dye, or even getting legislation through with Health Canada to ban certain food coloring, because food coloring is purely advertising. It's certain companies wanting to have a competitive edge over a different company, so they make their colors more bright. So there's many European countries that have banned certain food coloring agents, and I think the Christian Heritage Party thinks that we need to do the same, because that is potentially carcinogenic, and it's also connected to hyperactivity in kids. So if we can do all these things, we don't necessarily need to build more healthcare. We should, because we're a growing population, but we need to reduce the amount of need for healthcare.
That's very true, and there's more solutions out there than most people are aware of. So, military.
Yes, the military. That's something before getting into politics I knew was a problem, but I didn't know how many people cared about that problem. The Christian Heritage Party believes that a country should be able to defend itself. And as of right now, we believe we are not able to defend ourselves. We rely on the U.S. to do that for us. So the CHP would commit to at least fulfilling our obligations to NATO, which is 2% of our GDP, and our obligation to our soldiers, because it's demoralizing when you are the laughingstock of other countries in their military because you don't have the proper supplies. And you can't have a fully active military if you are not supplying them with the equipment they need. So we have, the Christian Heritage Party believes that we have an obligation to NATO, our soldiers, and our people to increase our spending in the military.
Equity.
Equity is very important. As a Christian Heritage Party, we are based on Christian values and believe that everybody's made in God's image and that they have worth. And so that's something where, whether you're rich or poor, whether you're whatever race or ethnic background, you should be treated fairly. And I think that there's a lot of policies in place in the government now that the Christian Heritage Party believes have gone almost to an extreme where it's unhelpful, because we've gone to a place in culture where instead of you can have this job even if you're a woman, let's say, to, well, you will get this job because you are a woman. Well, that's also not fair. So the CHP believes that fairness isn't overextending, it's making it available and the best person should be able to get that job or opportunity. And you can also respect that, like the past and how maybe that puts certain people at an advantage over others. But despite that, you still have to be fair, because if you're not being fair for the sake of being fair, that's also not right.
Which it seems like a T-shirt slogan or something. Like, don't be fair just to be fair. But I understand your point. Yeah. Abortion. Now, this is before I knew that I'd be interviewing someone from the Christian Heritage Party. I put this as an issue because it's usually dragged out by somebody as to show their, I don't know, intolerance or lack of caring. And it seems to be often used against, small c and large c conservatives. And the reality is that the Supreme Court made a decision about many years ago that the federal government, whoever was in charge, needed to make a new law about abortion. So really, there is no law at this point. And, we know that the Liberals have dragged it out and try and tarnish the image of the Conservative Party. But, there are those that have very strong opinions about it. So what would the Christian Heritage Party do about this? Will there be a new law, or, is it something that that the Christian Heritage Party would want to target?
Yeah, abortion is something that is, I feel really passionate about. And I have really appreciated the opportunity getting into politics now to talk to people about, because it's not something you just talk with your neighbors on your average day. And so when I've come to appreciate, it's just how many different opinions and different backgrounds and perspectives people have. And that, I try to be really caring in that. But the Christian Heritage Party believes that there should be a law, because as of right now, since 1988, there has been no law preventing abortion at any time before birth. And so that has seen the killing of 4 million babies in that time. And I say killing, people don't necessarily agree with me on that, but when I think of it from a biological perspective, a baby from conception, whether there's 2, 5, whatever, however many cells, is growing. And so then if you stop that growth dies. So whether you call the baby a baby or not, or a fetus, it's growing and it is now dead. And so that's something where we care so much about death after someone's born. If a child dies, like that's heartbreaking, and it is. But why is that not for people before they're born? And so I find that very sad. In 2023, 101,553 reported abortions happened, which means not all of them are required to record their abortion. So there's more than that. And so that's something from a perspective of caring for people. I understand there's certain circumstances that are very difficult. It's hard to find stats on why people have an abortion. So I can only find some from the United States, but it isn't the same as Canada, but would have similar relations to Canadian statistics. And under 1% of abortions were because of health and emergency, and under 5% of abortions were because of rape or abuse. And then the rest of them were elective, which means it could be financial issues or spousal arguments, whatever it might be. And some are even because of the gender of the baby. If the baby's a girl or a boy, they'll be like, nope, which I think is the ultimate sexism. And so these are all things that the CHP believes in. Not only the abortion side, we need to have a law for abortion, we also need to implement legislation to support moms and families and have a good economy, so that you don't have to be worried about supporting your family and your child into the future. So the things that the CHP would do would be to, yes, do what the government is supposed to make a law, because basically the Supreme Court said that the previous law was unconstitutional, so we need to make a new one. So the CHP would make one that would hopefully be as strict as possible while still meeting those requirements, but then diverting money that would go towards those abortions and things like that to resources for moms, resources for adoption, making adoption more accessible and more training for adoption. Because currently the government is trying to strip charitable status from those organizations, and that is not going to help Canada grow as a country, and we're also killing our children in the process.
I like your approach in terms of not just strictly being anti-abortion, but being pro-life, in the sense that so many have said that it's one thing to oppose abortion, but what are you doing to help those children when they're actually born and they need something more than just, good wishes and a, little tiny high five? It's so that's a good approach, and it's interesting that just maybe not the conservatives' approach to that law, but how the liberals could be in power for 9 years and not even approach that law. So, all right. Well, thank you for that. That's really the guts of a political party's beliefs, is those key things. And I appreciate getting your perspective on that. Moving on, several local officials and non-government people have shared on Exit 425 the increased concern for the poor and the homeless, with unhoused refugees complicating the situation even more. Are they connected, and how would you fix this? I mean, the issue of poor and homelessness in Clarington is just getting huge, and Oshawa, they've recognized it longer, but we're seeing it more and more every day in Clarington.
Yeah, it's a really tough situation because a lot of homelessness comes about because of federal policy, but then affects the municipal level and the towns themselves. And so then as a government, you hear about homelessness, but you don't dedicate resources to it appropriately because you're not the one physically seeing the problems themselves. And so I find that really frustrating as well. And so I guess there's two parts of this. It's the Christian Heritage Party believes it's important to take care of the needy, the truly needy poor now, but then also keeping people from becoming poor and needy in the future. And so you used to ask if the refugees are connected or not, and I think that they aren't the problem, but they add to. They are above and beyond kind of the issue at hand. And I think that as a government, you need to be aware when you're taking in refugees of what you can handle and how you can handle them. Because if you are bringing a refugee in from a country to throw them on the street in Toronto, that is not being kind to our neighbor. That's not being kind to those people. You need to have a situation for them that they can prosper. And so I think from that perspective, the federal government and the Christian Heritage Party as a party would believe that we need to really take a strong, hard look at our refugee policy, because we are called to help those in need. But if we can't help them, then it doesn't work to just say we'll help them anyways. So I think that is one part of it that the federal government has jurisdiction over that they can change. And when it comes to the homeless from within our country, I think fair tax that we talked about earlier and helping those poor people gain some amount of wealth and move forward, I think will be a key part in keeping people from becoming homeless and having those difficulties start in the first place. And then one interesting thing that my wife is really passionate about is the bank account problem. Because if you don't have a home address, you can't get a bank account. If you can't get a bank account, you can barely find work. If you can't work, you can't make any money. And so you are just stuck on welfare. That is your lot in life unless you can save up enough to get a home address. So I think one key thing that the federal government could do is fund research and a project that would give homeless people a place to have like a home mailbox of sorts, or a homing address, so that they can get a bank account, so they can get a job, so that they can move forward. Because a lot of people want to move forward, but they can't. And so I think that's a really key part in the homelessness crisis. And I think also the federal government doesn't have jurisdiction over the sending out of welfare, but we need to really take a hard look at, is the welfare going to the right people? Because if we spread, let's say, welfare money over, let's say, just for the sake of number, 1 million people, and they get some money, or you cut the number in half to 500,000 that are truly needing it, then those people can get the more help that they need. And so those numbers are just for the sake of numbers, but that idea of focusing on people that need it so that they can move forward, I think is really important from a federal perspective.
And sometimes different programs, right? If you're willing to change the approach and not just do it under welfare, but do maybe more targeted approaches to the people who have particular needs. But that's really interesting, and I appreciate your response to that. Thomas, I really want to thank you for being here and meeting me here at Exit 425 today. Thomas, how can people reach you and learn more about the Christian Heritage Party?
They can reach me on my website, chpthomas.ca, or reach me at my email, thomas.zekveld at chp.ca.
Thomas, once again, thank you very much for being here.
Thank you for having me.